I'm always so thankful for the stories of Moses as I reflect on what it means to practice leadership, whether I'm in a church community setting or in an organizational business setting. In the stories of Moses, all of the challenges of leadership are there. The grappling with the responsibilities of what it means to be a leader. The periodic uncertainty of wondering if you have what it takes to lead in a particular situation. The constant need for discernment. The wrestling with what it means to be faithful. And in today's story, the necessity of dealing with challenges to your leadership. Moses faced them all. In the text from Exodus for this third week in Lent, Moses, obedient to the call and commandments of God, has led the Israelites out of their long slavery in Egypt against impossible odds. Now they are journeying through the wilderness of sin, and frankly, the euphoria of their new freedom has quickly worn off. There is nothing but rock and desert. Water and food are scarce, and while God has promised them a new land, it seems a long way off. The people are doubting. They are doubting God's promises and provisions. They are doubting Moses' leadership, and they are less than confident about the future. And as we know, doubt, fear, and anxiety do not typically produce the most positive and helpful behavior in us. How often as leaders do we find ourselves in situations where people are quarreling with us and among themselves, where they simply cannot seem to grasp or hold on to the vision of the future that God has for them, where doubt and anxiety erode their ability or their willingness to move faithfully forward? All around us we hear grumbling. We hear those comments that things were better back in the past, that we should never have undertaken this foolish journey to a new future. Because in the present moment, walking toward that future feels like a journey through an unknown, inhospitable, and even frightening wilderness. And so the grumbling and the finger-pointing spread. Such are the crucial moments of real testing in leadership. And how we as leaders respond is crucial. What do we do when we sense that our leadership is being called into question? And when people are getting lost in their confusion and their fear? How do we lead when their confidence in our leadership seems shaky? Do we amass more evidence that we are right and simply try to push through the agenda? Do we separate the grumblers from our allies and then mount a counter campaign? Do we stalk off and tell ourselves we're justified in leaving behind such ingratitude and stubborn unwillingness to see and walk toward the future? All of that and more is so tempting. What does Moses do? Well, Moses takes his exasperation and frustration and annoyance, which are real, and turns to God. What shall I do with this people? They're almost ready to stone me, he asks. It's important to see that in this moment of fear and frustration, Moses nonetheless acts out of his acknowledgement that these people are God's people. And the journey toward a new future is God's plan for them. And God is the one who's going to have to intervene. Moses knows he's been called to lead. He's certain of that. But he also understands that he's a steward of God's plan. And in this turning point moment, Moses wants to be in sync with God's plan, even more than he wants to be a popular and successful and effective leader. As the people grumble, Moses turns around to God and says, "Look, these people and their future are yours. What do you want me to do?" And God insists that Moses do what God has called him to do. To go on ahead of the people, to take some trusted leaders with him, and to take the equipment that God has given him, to continue to act in faith that God will provide whatever is necessary to move through the challenges at hand. So too, When God calls us to lead God's people through the ever-changing and ever-challenging context of the world in which we live, we're invited to see ourselves as stewards of God's plan and God's people. We too can lead in the assurance that the God who comes to us in Jesus Christ is both out ahead of us and walking beside us to equip us for every challenge and every grumble along the way.